Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Fury, and this is English 3003 Spoken Word Poetry. This is a short recorded lecture. This is everything that I would say to you if we were meeting on campus today. I can't tell you how long this is going to be because this is a very new class. I just actually wrote the class description and proposal about 3 or 4 years ago, but it was rejected. And as spoken word has gotten more popular, I submitted the very same course description and proposal last year, and it was accepted. So it's a brand new course. I've never taught it before, so I don't know how long this is going to be. I'm going to go over the syllabus very briefly because there isn't that much to go over it. And then I'm going to give you some background on the two poems that you're going to be reading for today. So on the syllabus, which is in course information on Blackboard, the most important information on the first page is my email address and my office hours. Basically, I just want to communicate to you that you are very important to me. So at any point during the semester, whether it's tomorrow or in 2 months, if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to email me. I check my email several times a day, except on weekends. And I will get back to you. I try to be as quick as I can. The only thing is I commute from North Jersey, so sometimes there will be like blocks of time where I'm just not able to check email. So if I happen to miss your email, if you don't get a response from me in 24 hours, send another one. In terms of books for this course, there are no required books. Everything that we are reading and watching is available online for free. However, if you would like to get a book, I would recommend Aloud, Voices from the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. The Nuyorican Poets Cafe is a hugely important place. So this book has a great introduction that gives you some of the history of the Nuyorican, and it also includes some of the most celebrated poets and their poems. So it's a great book to get. There are others that I could recommend, but I wanted the focus to be more, I didn't want to go too crazy with books. So if you do want me to recommend more books, just ask me and I can give you more recommendations. So your grade for this class, as I've told many of you, this is supposed to be a fun class. However, I hope that you want to also write good poetry, and that will be something that will be challenging for you because it's challenging for everyone to to write something that's truly outstanding. So hopefully you want to do that. And well, anyway, you'll be writing four individual poems. And then one of those poems you'll pick for the midterm and you'll revise it and you'll, try to perfect it. And then you'll perform it and that will be your midterm. And then the second half of the semester, you're going to be working on what's called a group piece. That is if you don't know what that is, it's a really cool thing. There could be 4 or 5 poets, and they do a poem together. We're going to be watching, I think 4 or 5 of them we're going to be studying. And so you're going to collaborate with other students. You're going to write a group piece, and you're going to perform it, and that is the final. So the group piece, I believe, is 400 points. Each individual poem is 100 points, and then the midterm is 200 for 1,000 points. So it may not seem like there's a lot of work, but I just ask that when you write the poems, you really give it your all. I have very explicit directions for you, and there are excellent prompts to help inspire you, and the material we're going to be studying will definitely inspire you. So it should be a great semester. That said, I hate to say this in the first 4 minutes I'm talking to you, but there's usually one incident, not in this class, but in other courses that I teach per semester of plagiarism. So please don't plagiarize. You don't need to. You're a smart, creative person. If you're ever backed into a corner and there's an assignment due, contact me and I'll work with you. Okay, if you do have any questions about the syllabus, please ask them when we meet for our virtual class at 5 o'clock. So now I'm going to move on to just me. If you're wondering who is this lady and why is she qualified to teach a spoken word poetry class, because this, as a creative writing class, this is different than teaching like British Lit or something which a person has academic credentials for. So you may be wondering, what are her credentials? Well, I'm glad that you asked. So when I was 12, um, I live closer to New York City than you guys do. When I was 12, I found an ad in the newspaper for a poetry course at the New School in Manhattan. And I signed myself up, and I was the only 12-year-old in the course. But they brought us to the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. The Nuyorican Poets Cafe is a cultural landmark. Some people believe I'm one of them, that it had a big role in catapulting spoken word and slam poetry to where it is today. I would argue that spoken word and slam would not be the phenomena that they are without the Nuyorican. That is because the Nuyorican is in Lower Manhattan, and they have been having their Friday night slam since before I was 12. I first went there and saw this when I was 12, and then I used to take the train into the city. So I've been going to the Nuyorican since I was 12. If you go there to this day, to their Friday night slam, the line wraps around the block. I'm not kidding. You have to get there 2 hours beforehand. It's standing room only. The talent there is just, it's amazing. And this place was started by two poets, Miguel Pinheiro and Miguel Algarin. And I actually had they're both dead now. Pinheiro died in the 80s. Miguel Algarin just died in the past few years. But I actually met him several times. I hung out with him twice. Once we went out to lunch and I interviewed him, and he was just brilliant. And the other time I just ran into him at a restaurant because I was going to this slam, but I got there early. So there was this Mexican restaurant on the corner. So I went in to have a Corona, and who do I see sitting a few seats down but Miguel Algarin? And so I wanted to talk to him, but I thought, oh, it would be so much cooler if he talked to me first. So I give it a couple minutes, and then he says to me from, across down the bar, he says, I've been watching you. And I said, no, I've been watching you. And he was really taken aback because he was, a much older man, and I was much younger than I am now. And I said, you're Miguel Algarin. And he invited me to come sit with him. And I forget the exact back and forth of the conversation, but he was wearing this necklace, and he told me that a friend of his had just made it for him, and he put it on me because he said he wanted to have my energy. And then he was performing at, what is it called? Summer Stage in Central Park. And he told me that if I came, he would give me the necklace. But I had to teach that night. And this was when I was probably like 27 or 28. So I was new to teaching. It was my first real teaching job at a university or a college. And now I would cancel class and go. But then I thought, no, I have to go to class. So anyway, I missed that opportunity. And then I've seen him numerous times at the cafe. So I think that qualifies me. But also from 2009 to 2012, I was very active in the tri-state area as a spoken word / slam poet. I performed at more places in Jersey City than I can even remember. I performed at the Nuyorican in New York City, Bar 13 in New York City. Where else? Loser Slam, which is in your area, South Jersey. I have competed in 2012. I made it onto, New Jersey only has right now one nationally certified slam team. And I made it onto that slam team in 2012. I was the first female poet that they had. In 2012, I competed at the National Poetry Slam in Charlotte. And I scored the best out of all my teammates. The reason we didn't make it to finals is because the guys in my team did a group piece the second night, and they had stage fright, so they got scores of like 0. And that brought our numbers way down, and we were out of the competition. And then some personal things happened between me and the rest of the team, so that's why I've been sort of inactive. But I also taught spoken word and slam to 7th and 8th graders at Rise Academy in Newark for 2 years. And I have been invited to high schools to perform and to teach poetry to the kids. So all of those things, all of those reasons make me qualified to be here with you. Let's see. So yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so moving on to the poems that you are going to be asked to read for our virtual meeting. There are 2. They're both posted in Blackboard Unit 1 of course content. The first is Howl by Allen Ginsberg. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this poem prior to this class. This is the book that it comes in if you want to order it. It has some of Ginsberg's other poems. Interestingly, this is a poem that's not typically taught in university classes, but it's considered one of the greatest American poems. So go figure. But anyway, Howl was written by Allen Ginsberg in 1954. He was one of the Beat poets. The Beat poets were definitely a major precursor to spoken word. And let's see, so Ginsberg, he wrote the poem. It was partially inspired by a peyote vision, some people say. Others say that it was inspired by someone he knew named Carl Solomon, who he met in a psychiatric institution. I think it was more inspired by the self-destructive or destructive nature of like the lives of the people in his circle. So Ginsberg was friend, and the Beats were a group of intellectuals, artists, and writers, and many of them had very sort of tragic lives. And Ginsberg writes about all of them, and in much of what he says, to my knowledge at least, like I can literally pick out sentences where there he's talking about William Burroughs, there he's talking about Jack Kerouac, there he's talking about himself. So it's really, as the first line says, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked. It's about it's his reflection on the destruction of these brilliant people that he knew, and it's really beautiful. So Solomon, because he's the one who, in Ginsberg's mind, suffers the most and has sort of made the greatest sacrifice in voluntarily committing himself to a psychiatric institution. I think Solomon is sort of emblematic of the whole generation of the Beats who were destroyed, according to Ginsberg, by what? We'll get into that later. But again, it's important to also recognize that these were very brilliant and creative people, but they were troubled. Now, the 1950s was a very conservative time period, so that didn't help. So whose fault was it that they were troubled? Was it their fault? Was it the fault of, the society surrounding them that was so repressive? I don't know. Your opinions can vary on that. But so some examples of who were these people and how were they troubled. William Burroughs is known, one of the members of the Beats. I believe he went to Harvard. I'm 90% sure he went to Harvard, but he was a heroin addict. He wrote one of his most famous books is called Junkie. And there is a line, well, there are many lines in Howl that refer to him, but one of them is suffering Eastern sweats, Tangerine bone grindings, and migraines of China under junk or heroin withdrawal in Newark's bleak furnished room. So that's one direct reference to one of Ginsberg's people. And he also refers to Jack Kerouac very often, many times throughout the poem. Jack Kerouac was another one of the Beat writers. He was most famous for his book On the Road, which if you haven't read it, I recommend that you do so immediately. It's very inspiring. It's very fun, especially if you're a young person. It'll make you want to take a cross-country trip. It's about these two guys, and they take a lot of speed, but they stay up for days and drive across the country and, steal cars. And it's just a fun, inspiring book, and it's beautifully written. But Kerouac was plagued by alcoholism, and he died at the age of 47, which may sound old to you guys, but I'm 45, so 47 is really not that old. But Kerouac, I remember in high school, that's when I discovered the Beats, reading something about a fan tracking down Kerouac in Massachusetts, and when he answered the door, the fan was just like horrified because Kerouac was in such bad shape due to his drinking, and it ultimately killed him at 47. He had a hemorrhage, which was caused by his heavy drinking, and that's of course tragic. So this poem is also a condemnation of capitalism and aspects of modern society that are exploitative and repressive, and it's definitely a challenge to mainstream culture. Part 2 of Howl addresses the monster or the destructive element. Ginsberg calls it Moloch, Moloch is, if you want a literal definition, a Canaanite deity associated with child sacrifice. And the Hebrew Bible tells of this god worshipped by ancient people. So, God that ate children, or that children were sacrificed to. For Ginsburg, Moloch is many things. In part 2, you can read it for yourself, but just some of the things he calls it: solitude, filth, ugliness, ash cans and unobtainable dollars, children screaming under stairways, boys sobbing in armies, old men weeping in parks, the heavy judger of men, Moloch whose buildings are judgment, Moloch the vast stone of war, Moloch the stunned governments. So there's many things to him. And then part 3 of the poem focuses directly on Carl Solomon. However, there are some inaccuracies. Much of what he writes about Solomon is true to my knowledge, but he writes about, I'm with you in Rockland, but Carl Solomon wasn't institutionalized in Rockland. So, but there's a line, for example, in part 1 of HOWL, who threw potato salad at CCNY lecturers on Dadaism and subsequently presented themselves on the granite steps of the madhouse with shaven heads and harlequin speech of suicide demanding instantaneous lobotomy. That's about Carl Solomon, who actually did that stuff. So, so that is HOWL. I'm already at 16 minutes and I still have The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. So I don't want to take too much of your time. But please read it before we meet, and it's just the language is so gorgeous and exhilarating. But I'm curious to know what you think. And then the second poem, which you are going to listen to, is "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" by Gil Scott-Heron. Now this was written in 1970, so this came later, and this was a part of the Black Arts Movement, which has very close ties to the Beat Movement because a poet named Amiri Baraka started out with the beats. Actually, his name was Leroy Jones then. But with the coming of the civil rights movement and Black nationalism, Leroy Jones sort of had an awakening. And he had a white wife at the time. He left her, divorced her. He changed his name to Amiri Baraka. And he moved to Harlem. And he started like a whole nother literary career. And he was a huge part of the Black Arts Movement. The Black Arts Movement was about creating Black art for Black people. It was about Black consciousness, racial uplift, and self-determinism. And the sort of philosophy was that the poems should serve an actual practical purpose. Like the way a gun could be used in a revolution, the poems should be that powerful that, like a gun is powerful, the poems should be that powerful. There's actually a poem by Amiri Baraka called Black Art, in which he says poems are bullshit unless they are teeth or trees or lemons piled on a step. Fuck poems unless they are useful. It goes on. But that was the philosophy, that the literature shouldn't just exist for art's sake, that it should uplift Black people. So you definitely see that in The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. It definitely, if you've listened to it, I'm sure I don't need to summarize it for you. It's pretty clear what it's about. Here's one excerpt. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so, those are television shows, will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane or on search for tomorrow, because Black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. So you can see what it is about. Something that you probably don't know is that it was a response to another spoken word piece by The Last Poets. Now, The Last Poets are also hugely important to spoken word and also hip hop. So their poem, When the Revolution Comes, the first line of it is, when the revolution comes, some of us will probably catch it on TV. So Gil Scott-Heron is responding to that, saying the revolution won't be televised. But back to The Last Poets, they actually made the Billboard charts with their albums. And When the Revolution Comes ends with the lines that, until then, you know and I know that people will still party and bullshit and party and bullshit. So if you listen to hip hop, you should recognize that from the Biggie Smalls song, and then also Busta Rhymes and Rah Digga did a song, Party and Bullshit. So it comes from The Last Poets. So those are just some interesting facts. And after you've listened to The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, after you read HOWL and listened to The Revolution, I would like you to choose which one do you like more. Oh, I forgot to tell you one thing about HOWL. So Ginsberg wrote it out on paper first. It actually took him about a year to write it. But then after he had written it, he read it at the Sixth Gallery in San Francisco. And that was considered a landmark event. That was sort of viewed as the official or unofficial kickstart to the Beat movement. And many people were there when he read HOWL, and many recognized it as like, wow, this is a really important poem. So that's just important for you to know that though Ginsberg wrote it, there was an oral component, like he performed it, and performing it was a major event that impacted literary history. So I'm just curious to know what you think of both of them. Which one do you think is more impactful and why? So that is what we will talk about when we meet for our virtual lecture at 5. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to meeting you. Bye.